chilly Friday morning, the usual warmth inside a McDonald's restaurant stood in sharp contrast to the biting cold outside. Emma, a dedicated employee of 5 years, stood at the sink, drying her hands as the clock ticked steadily towards 10:30 a.m. The dining area was mostly quiet, just a few scattered customers sipping coffee, munching on breakfast items. Old Mr. Johnson sat hunched over his newspaper, his half-eaten McMuffin abandoned on the tray, while a young couple whispered to each other, their hands intertwined on the table. But in the kitchen, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. The booming voice of Mr. Bradshaw, the restaurant's manager, echoed through the air as he berated his team over a tray of discarded food. "Look at this mess," he bellowed, his face turning an alarming shade of red. Holding up a slightly burnt burger patty, he shook his head in disgust. "Unacceptable. And these fries? Swimming in oil." He tossed them back onto the tray like they were garbage. Emma winced. She knew how hard her team worked, Jack, Mina, Tom, each of them doing their best under impossible standards. But no matter what, Mr. Bradshaw always found something to complain about. And then came the final blow. "If this keeps up, I'm going to start charging all of you for the discarded items. Maybe then you'll pay attention." The silence that followed was deafening. When Mr. Bradshaw finally stormed off for his break, Emma exchanged a look with her coworkers. They hadn't touched the faulty tray like he'd ordered. Instead, they stood there, hesitant. Something unspoken passed between them. Then, with a quick glance over her shoulder to make sure no one was watching, Emma made her decision. With quiet determination, she scooped up the food and stepped toward the back door, nudging it open just enough to let the cold morning air rush in. Outside, huddled near the alley, were a few familiar faces, homeless children who often lingered nearby, their hungry eyes filled with silent hope. Emma didn't hesitate. She knelt down, offering them the food with a soft smile. Their gratitude was instant, their eyes lighting up as they reached for the warm meals. But before she could even turn back inside, a sharp voice cut through the air. "Emma!" She barely had time to react before Mr. Bradshaw came storming toward her, his face twisted in fury. "Are you out of your mind?" he spat. "That's company property. You're stealing." Emma opened her mouth to protest, to explain, but he wasn't interested in listening. "You're fired," he declared, his voice dripping with self-righteous authority. "Get your things and get out." But what Mr. Bradshaw didn't realize, what he hadn't noticed, was that sitting at one of the restaurant's tables, quietly observing the entire scene, was none other than Keanu Reeves. He had seen it all. The cruelty, the injustice, and the selfless kindness of one McDonald's worker who had just lost her job for doing the right thing. And what happened next? Well, let's just say, Mr. Bradshaw had no idea who he had just messed with. The quiet hum of the restaurant was a stark contrast to the tension simmering beneath the surface. Emma stood near the counter, her hands working on autopilot as she listened to Jack sigh beside her. "These new order machines need a serious upgrade," he muttered. "They never handle the breakfast-lunch switch right. It'd help if they actually showed what's available instead of making us deal with confused customers every morning." Emma nodded, glancing towards the back door. "I think Bradshaw's gonna be gone for a while. Did you see how he hesitated before grabbing his bag? It's like he suddenly decided to be gone longer than just a smoke break." Jack frowned, considering it. "Yeah, maybe." Mina, never one to hold back her opinions, shook her head. "I don't know, guys. He went through the back door. That usually means he's coming back soon. If he was leaving for real, he'd take the front and his car." Tom, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up, his voice low. "We should be careful. None of us can afford to lose this job." Emma knew he was right, but something else weighed on her mind, something far more urgent. "They'll be here soon," she murmured, barely above a whisper. Jack, Mina, and Tom exchanged knowing looks. They all understood what she meant. The children. The ones who came to the alley behind the restaurant every day, hoping for a scrap of kindness. It was dangerous, what they were doing. If Mr. Bradshaw caught them handing out food, they'd be fired on the spot. But standing there in that small, dimly lit kitchen, they silently made their decision. They would keep helping, no matter the risk. The gentle chime of the restaurant bell pulled Emma from her thoughts. She took a steadying breath, adjusting her uniform before stepping forward with a professional smile. "Good morning," she greeted the customer, a middle-aged man with kind eyes. "What can I get for you today?" The man glanced up at the menu, furrowing his brow in thought. I'll take a coffee, a baked apple pie, and a 6-piece nugget box." Emma nodded, her fingers dancing over the touch screen. "Would you like your coffee black or with cream and sugar?" "Black is fine, thank you." As the machine hummed, filling the air with the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee, Emma's eyes flickered toward the back door. Her heart pounded. She needed to time this perfectly. "Here you go, sir," she said, placing the tray on the counter. "1 black coffee, a baked apple pie, and a 6-piece nugget box. Anything else I can get for you?" The man smiled and shook his head. "No, that's perfect. Thank you." Emma forced a polite smile, but her mind was racing. She quickly washed her hands again, buying herself a few extra seconds. Jack gave her a subtle nod of encouragement. Mina kept watch near the front. Tom, ever cautious, pretended to clean the grill but kept glancing her way. Then came the soft knock. Emma's breath caught as she reached for the door, opening it just enough to reveal a young girl in a tattered pink winter jacket. Sophia. Her big brown eyes were filled with a quiet mix of hope and hesitation. "Miss Emma," she whispered. Is the mean man here?" Emma knelt down, speaking just as softly. "Not right now. But we have to be quick." The girl nodded, shivering against the cold. "We're really hungry today. It's so cold outside." Emma's chest tightened. She turned swiftly to the faulty tray, grabbing a chicken burger and a few beef patties, wrapping them carefully in napkins before placing them in Sophia's hands. "Here, sweetie," Emma said gently. "Is this enough?" Sophia clutched the food to her chest, eyes wide with gratitude. But then she hesitated. "Miss Emma, is it okay if I take this to my brother first? I'll come back for more for me and Mom." Emma swallowed hard, her heart aching. A child, no older than 8, putting her family's needs before her own. "Of course, Sophia," she whispered. "Go quickly, and be careful, okay?" Sophia nodded, a small, grateful smile lighting up her face. "Thank you, Miss Emma. You're an angel." Just as the little girl turned to run, the sharp ring of the counter bell cut through the air. Emma's stomach dropped. "Hurry, Sophia," she urged in a hushed voice. "And watch for the manager on your way back, okay?" Sophia gave one last nod before disappearing into the alley. Emma exhaled, pressing the door shut just as the heavy footsteps of Mr. Bradshaw echoed from the front. And that was when she knew. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Emma tried to shake off the unease as she returned to the counter, forcing a smile for the next customer. But no matter how many orders she took, her thoughts kept drifting back to the slightly open back door, to Sophia, to the cold reality that a child was out there, waiting, hungry. The morning blurred by in a haze of transactions and routine, but her heart never stopped racing. She kept glancing at the clock, counting the minutes, waiting for Sophia to return. Then, just as the lunch rush began to swell, Emma's heart nearly stopped. Standing at the counter, looking as casual as any other customer, was Keanu Reeves. Emma blinked, convinced she must be seeing things. But no, there he was. The Hollywood star, right there, in her McDonald's. Swallowing hard, she took a deep breath and stepped forward, forcing herself to stay professional. "Good afternoon, sir. What can I get for you today?" Keanu smiled warmly, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Hey there. Could I get a double cheeseburger, fries, and a Coke, please?" Emma nodded quickly, trying to keep her hand steady as she tapped in the order. "Certainly, sir. Will that be for here or to go?" "For here, thanks," he replied, his voice just as kind and gentle as she had always imagined it would be. As she prepared his order, Emma stole glances at him, his casual jeans, his well-worn leather jacket. It was clear he was trying to keep a low profile, and she was determined to respect that. "Here you go, sir," she said, placing the tray on the counter. "1 double cheeseburger, fries, and a Coke. Enjoy your meal." Keanu gave her another warm smile. "Thanks so much." Emma watched as he took his tray to an outdoor table at the front of the restaurant, still barely believing what had just happened. But before she could even process it, movement at the back door caught her eye. Her stomach flipped. Sophia. Peeking in through the slightly ajar door, her wide, anxious eyes scanning the kitchen. Emma quickly made her way over, pushing the door open just enough to let the small girl slip inside. "Sophia," she whispered. "Did you get the food to your brother?" The little girl nodded, her small frame trembling from the cold. "Yes, he was so happy. But I'm still really hungry. And Mom." Emma's chest tightened. Without hesitation, she turned to the faulty tray, grabbing another burger, some chicken nuggets, and a few more patties, wrapping them quickly in napkins before placing them in Sophia's hands. But as she handed the food over, she noticed the way Sophia's eyes kept darting nervously around. "Sophia, sweetie," Emma said gently, crouching down to meet her gaze. "I know you're hungry, but you can't stay here. The manager could come back any minute, and if he sees you..." Sophia bit her lip, her tiny fingers clutching the warm food. "But Miss Emma, if I take too much back at once, the other kids might try to steal it. Can I just eat some outside?" Emma hesitated. She understood the girl's fear, the immediate need, but the risk was too great. "I know it's hard, sweetie, but you need to go finish your meal at your tent, okay?" she urged softly. "I don't want you to get in trouble." Sophia nodded reluctantly, hugging the food to her chest. "Thank you so much." As she stepped back outside, Emma called after her, voice low but firm. "Be careful, okay? And remember, you can always come back later, when it's safer." She gently shut the door, leaving it slightly ajar as usual, then leaned against the wall for a moment, heart heavy. Returning to the kitchen, she found Tom, Mina, and Jack huddled together, their voices low. As she approached, they fell silent, exchanging wary glances. "Everything okay?" Jack asked, nodding toward the back door. Emma ran a hand through her hair. "Yeah. Just the usual." Mina sighed, crossing her arms. "Emma, I know you want to help, but this is getting dangerous. If Mr. Bradshaw finds out..." "I know," Emma cut in, exhaling. "But what else can we do? These kids are starving, and all this food just goes to waste anyway." Tom, ever the quiet thinker, finally spoke up. "Maybe we need to look at this differently. There has to be a better way to distribute the unused food. Something official." Silence fell over the group as they considered his words. The contrast between cold corporate policies and real human need had never felt more glaring. And then, a sharp, furious shout cut through the air. Emma's blood ran cold. Through the kitchen window, she saw him. Mr. Bradshaw. Storming toward the back alley, his face twisted in rage. And Sophia was standing right there. "What the hell is this?" he bellowed. "Get away from there, you filthy homeless kid." Emma, Jack, Mina, and Tom froze. Panic shot through her like lightning. Through the glass, she saw Sophia standing by the trash bins, her tiny frame rigid with fear as Mr. Bradshaw loomed over her. Emma's instinct was to run out, to shield her, to do something, but she knew that would only make things worse. Instead, she forced herself to turn back toward the counter, where a new group of customers had just walked in. Her heart screamed at her to act. But all she could do was wait. And hope, pray, that someone else had seen. That someone else would step in before it was too late. And what Emma didn't know was that outside, at his table, Keanu Reeves had just put down his burger. His sharp eyes locked onto the scene unfolding in the alley. And the quiet, unassuming movie star? Yeah. He was about to make his presence known. As Emma took the next order, her hands moved automatically, but her mind was elsewhere. The weight of what had just happened pressed heavily on her shoulders. Had Sophia gotten away safely? Had Mr. Bradshaw left her alone? Every part of her wanted to check, to make sure, but all she could do was stand at the register and hope. The murmurs from the new customers pulled her back to the moment. They were exchanging uneasy glances, their eyes darting past her toward the back of the restaurant where the shouting had come from. "Excuse me," one of them, a middle-aged woman with a furrowed brow, spoke up. "What's going on back there?" "We heard yelling." Emma's stomach twisted, but she forced a polite smile. "Oh, nothing to worry about," she said, keeping her voice light. "Just a little misunderstanding between the manager and, well, some kids from the neighborhood." The woman's eyes widened. "Kids from the neighborhood? Do you mean homeless children?" Emma barely had time to respond before she noticed a shift in the group's demeanor. Their murmured conversation grew more animated, and she caught snippets of words: dangerous, unsanitary. The woman pulled her purse over her shoulder, her expression tightening. "You know what? I think we'll just go somewhere else for lunch." Emma's heart sank as she watched them turn and leave without ordering. For a moment, she just stood there, stunned. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. The mere mention of homeless children was enough to drive paying customers away. And what did that mean for Sophia? For all the kids out there, desperate for food but seen as nothing more than an inconvenience? Before she could dwell on it, a voice thundered across the restaurant. "All staff, in my office. Now." Emma stiffened. "Mr. Bradshaw." She exchanged tense glances with Jack, Mina, and Tom before they wordlessly followed the command. Inside the cramped manager's office, Mr. Bradshaw stood behind his desk, face red with fury. He didn't even wait for the door to shut before launching into a tirade. "I cannot believe what I just witnessed," he spat, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. "Do you have any idea how close we came to a disaster? Those vermin could have contaminated our entire kitchen." Emma clenched her fists at her sides, forcing herself to stay still. Jack shifted uncomfortably next to her, while Mina's jaw was so tight it looked like she might snap. Mr. Bradshaw continued, his voice laced with pure disgust. "From now on, I want every single one of you on high alert. If you see any of those homeless people near this restaurant, you are to call the police immediately. Do you understand?" A low murmur of assent filled the room, but Emma could feel the resentment hanging thick in the air. Mr. Bradshaw's lip curled. "These people are like disease-carrying rats," he sneered. "They scare off decent customers. They bring nothing but trouble. And I won't let them ruin this business. Just look at how small this franchise is compared to other McDonald's locations. It's my responsibility to improve it for the owner, and if he finds out about this mess, it's my job on the line." Emma felt sick. The others nodded stiffly, and with a dismissive wave, Mr. Bradshaw sent them back to work. As soon as they were out of the office, Emma exhaled shakily. She caught the looks on her coworkers' faces. Tom's brows were furrowed in deep concern, Mina's eyes burned with barely restrained fury, and Jack just looked sad. Without words, Emma mouthed a silent thank you to them. "Thank you for keeping quiet. For standing by her." They responded with the smallest nods. Their unity was the only comfort in the face of Mr. Bradshaw's cruelty. But as Emma returned to her station, her mind was still reeling. The way those customers had recoiled at the mere mention of homeless children, the way society so easily dismissed people who needed help the most. How many people thought like that? How many saw kids like Sophia as a problem instead of human beings? And how long could she keep doing this before Mr. Bradshaw caught her? For now, she had no choice but to push those thoughts aside. The clock struck noon, signaling the peak of the lunch rush, and Emma fell into the familiar rhythm of taking orders, handing out trays, answering questions. For the next 3 hours, the restaurant was a blur of movement and noise. Emma barely had time to think as she juggled impatient customers, complicated orders, and the constant demands of keeping everything running smoothly. It wasn't until 3 p.m., when the crowd finally began to thin, that she let herself breathe. And as the last customer of the rush walked away from the counter, she glanced at the clock. Her heart kicked up in her chest. It was almost time. Time to find out if Sophia had made it back. Time to see if she could help again, before it was too late. What Emma didn't know, however, was that someone else had been watching. Someone who had witnessed the way Mr. Bradshaw spoke. The way customers reacted. Someone who had just finished his meal and was now sitting back in his chair, deep in thought. Keanu Reeves had seen it all. And he was about to do something about it. As the minutes ticked by, Emma realized it was time, not just for her scheduled break, but for her real mission. She took a steadying breath before turning toward the kitchen. "Mina," she called, keeping her voice casual. "Can you cover the counter for me? I'm taking my break now." Mina glanced at her, eyes sharp with understanding. "Sure thing, Emma. Take your time." Emma nodded gratefully and made her way toward Mr. Bradshaw's office. She knocked lightly, bracing herself as she heard his gruff come in. Stepping inside, she kept her posture steady. "Mr. Bradshaw, I'm going to take my lunch break now, if that's all right." The manager barely looked up from his computer. "Fine. 30 minutes. Not a second more. We're short-staffed as it is." Emma bit back the retort on the tip of her tongue about how they wouldn't be short-staffed if he hadn't cut everyone's hours, but instead, she just nodded. "Thank you, sir." Without another word, she left the office, her heart pounding. She had 30 minutes. 30 precious minutes to find Sophia. To make sure she and her family were okay after the morning's chaos. Pushing open the back door, the cool afternoon air rushed against her skin. She took a deep breath, grounding herself, preparing. But as she stepped outside, something on the ground caught her eye. Her heart sank. There, lying on the sidewalk, was a perfectly wrapped burger, the one she had given Sophia for her mother earlier that day. Emma bent down, fingers trembling slightly as she picked it up. The sight of it, untouched, abandoned, told her everything. Sophia must have dropped it when Mr. Bradshaw had shouted at her. Emma could picture it too clearly, the little girl running in fear, the food slipping from her hands unnoticed. Her chest tightened with a mixture of sadness and determination. Clutching the burger, she took off down the nearby alleys, moving quickly, scanning the area. She was already 10 minutes into her break, and every second counted. Finally, after what felt like forever, her eyes caught a flash of pink in the distance. Her pulse spiked. There it was. Tucked away in a small alcove, barely visible from the street, was a tent. Sophia had once described it as her home. Emma approached carefully, not wanting to startle anyone inside. She knelt by the entrance and called softly, "Sophia?" "It's Emma, from McDonald's." For a moment, silence. Then, rustling from inside. The flap opened slightly, and Emma froze. It wasn't Sophia. Instead, she found herself face to face with a woman, one who bore a striking resemblance to the little girl. Sophia's mother. The woman's wary eyes studied Emma carefully, but there was a flicker of recognition. You're the one who helped Sophia," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Emma nodded, offering a gentle smile. "Yes. That's right. Is she here? I wanted to make sure she was okay after what happened this morning." The woman's face softened just slightly. "She's not here right now. She went to look for her brother, but thank you. Thank you for helping her. For helping us." As the woman spoke, Emma noticed movement behind her. And then, she saw it. A tiny bundle, cradled in the woman's arms. Emma's breath caught in her throat. A newborn baby. No more than a few weeks old. Oh. Emma exhaled, eyes widening. I didn't know Sophia had a baby sister. The woman nodded, a mix of pride and worry flickering across her face. She was born 3 weeks ago, she murmured. It's been difficult. Everything suddenly clicked in Emma's mind. Sophia had been asking for more food lately, not just for her mother, but because her mother was breastfeeding. She needed more nourishment. She was struggling to keep herself and her newborn fed. Emma swallowed hard. I'm so sorry, she said softly. I had no idea. Is there anything I can do to help? The woman hesitated, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. I'm not sure, she admitted. After what happened this morning, she was so scared. She thought she might have to start looking for food elsewhere, but we don't know many places that would help us. Emma's heart clenched at the thought of Sophia wandering the streets alone, searching for food. Of course, she said quickly. Please, tell her to come back to the restaurant after 5 p.m. The manager will be gone by then. And tell her to watch for a black Ford Explorer with the license plate XMT 5392. If that car is gone, it means it's safe for her to come. The woman's eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, Emma, she whispered. You're an angel. Emma smiled, but there was a lump in her throat. She glanced at her watch. Her break was almost over. I have to go now, she said apologetically. But please, make sure Sophia knows it's safe to come back. I'll be waiting for her. The woman nodded, giving Emma a final look of appreciation before pulling the tent flap closed. Emma turned and hurried back toward McDonald's, her thoughts racing. A new baby. A growing need for food. A terrified little girl too afraid to return. It was almost too much to process. As she approached the restaurant's back entry, she stopped for a moment. She reached into her pocket, pulling out a cigarette and a small cracker. Her fingers fumbled with the lighter, but she wasn't even sure why she'd pulled it out. Maybe to calm her nerves. Maybe to ground herself before walking back into the fake normalcy of the restaurant. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just about sneaking food to a few hungry kids anymore. This was bigger. And something was going to have to change. Soon. Emma's appetite had disappeared, her mind consumed with worry for Sophia and her family. Taking a deep breath, she stubbed out her barely smoked cigarette and straightened her uniform. She had to push through the rest of her shift, but her mission had just become even more critical and dangerous. The afternoon dragged on, customers keeping her busy, yet Sophia's newborn sibling haunted her thoughts. Between orders, she noticed Keanu still at his outdoor table, now working on his laptop. His extended stay intrigued her, but another rush of customers demanded her attention. During a brief lull, Emma impulsively prepared a tray, an apple pie, coffee, and nuggets, and approached Keanu. "Excuse me, sir," she said, placing the tray down. "A little something extra on the house." Keanu looked up, surprised. "That's kind of you, but really, I'm fine." Emma smiled. "Please, I insist. I noticed you've been here a while." Keanu studied her for a moment before smirking. "This isn't on the house, is it? You paid for it yourself." Emma blushed. "Well, yes. But it's just a small gesture." His warm smile grew. "In that case, I gladly accept." "Thank you, Emma," he said, glancing at her name tag. As she turned to leave, he added, "I've actually been working while I wait. My friend, someone important, is meeting me here." Curious but not wanting to pry, Emma simply nodded. "Well, if you need anything, let me know." Returning to work, she felt a small victory amid the stress. But as closing time neared, anticipation built. Finally, Mr. Bradshaw emerged, tossing Emma a sharp glance. "You're in charge of closing. Follow procedures, send me photos, and I want a full report in the morning." Yes, sir, she replied curtly, watching as he grabbed his keys and exited. The moment his Ford Explorer rumbled out of the parking lot, the atmosphere in the restaurant shifted. Jack grinned. He's really gone? Mina, less convinced, glanced at the back door. Do you think Sophia will come back after this morning? Tom sighed. We're going to get caught one of these days. This isn't sustainable. Emma knew they were right, but the image of Sophia's hungry, hopeful face was burned into her memory. I know, she admitted. But for now, we need to be ready. Those kids are counting on us. Right on cue, soft footsteps and hushed whispers echoed from the alley. Emma hurried to the back door, easing it open. There, 6 homeless children and 4 adults stood, their eyes filled with hunger and hope. Moving swiftly, Emma distributed happy meals for the kids, older burgers for the adults, offering reassuring smiles. But as she scanned the group, her chest tightened. No Sophia. Just as worry set in, a flash of pink caught her eye. At the back, partially hidden behind her brother, was Sophia, her mother standing protectively beside her, the newborn baby bundled in her arms. Sophia. Emma breathed in relief, kneeling down. Are you okay? Did he hurt you? Sophia stepped forward, exhaustion evident. Just a little cut on my leg, but it's bandaged now. Emma's heart clenched. She reached out, gently squeezing the girl's shoulder. I was worried about you. I even went to your tent. Sophia nodded. Mom told me. I was out looking for my brother and someone who could help with my leg. Understanding dawned on Emma as she carefully packed extra food, making sure to include protein-rich items for Sophia's mother. Handing her the box, Emma whispered, "You need this while nursing." Tears filled the woman's eyes. Thank you, Emma. You don't know what this means to us. But before Emma could respond, what the hell is going on here? Her blood ran cold. Mr. Bradshaw stood in the doorway, rage contorting his face. Time froze. His eyes darted from Emma to the homeless group, his face growing redder by the second. So this is why we have problems with those filthy vagrants hanging around? My own staff has been feeding them like stray cats? Emma's heart pounded as she instinctively stepped in front of Sophia and her family. Inside the restaurant, Tom, Mina, and Jack stood frozen, horrified. Mr. Bradshaw stalked toward Emma, his voice dripping with contempt. I trusted you, he spat. You're suspended immediately for violating company policy and stealing food. Emma opened her mouth to defend herself, but he cut her off, now glaring at her coworkers. And don't think I don't know about the rest of you, he sneered. False orders, intentionally making faulty products to feed these vermin. The injustice of it snapped something inside Emma. That's not true, she fired back. We only took food that would have been thrown out anyway, and these people aren't vermin. They're human beings who need help. Bradshaw's face turned a dangerous shade of red. Get out, he bellowed. Now. Before Emma could react, Bradshaw shoved her toward the door, in his fury, knocking into Sophia. The girl cried out in pain. And then, he grabbed her by the hair. No! Sophia's mother screamed, clutching the baby. Emma snapped. Stop, she shouted, lunging forward. She's already injured. The restaurant fell silent as customers turned in shock. And then, a chair scraped against pavement. Someone was rising from an outdoor table. Keanu Reeves. Emma barely had time to process it before he was at her side, his calm but commanding presence radiating authority. His voice was low, but firm. That was completely unacceptable, he said, eyes locked on Bradshaw. I saw everything. Bradshaw blinked, stunned. Mr. Reeves, this isn't your concern. Oh, it is, Keanu cut in smoothly. And I think it's about to become even more important. And then, the restaurant door chimed. A man in a crisp suit stepped inside, his presence commanding immediate attention. Emma's breath hitched. Keanu smiled. Clarkson. Took you long enough. The franchise owner. Keanu quickly relayed the events. As he spoke, Emma watched Bradshaw pale. Clarkson turned to the manager, his voice icy. Is this true? Bradshaw stammered, but Clarkson held up a hand. I've heard enough. You're terminated. Effective immediately. The weight of the words settled over the room. Bradshaw opened and closed his mouth, but there was nothing left to say. He stormed out, the door slamming behind him. Emma barely had time to process what had just happened when Clarkson turned to her, his expression softer. Emma, I want to hear more about what you've been doing. It seems we have a lot to discuss. Her heart pounded. For the first time, change felt possible. Keanu grinned. Go ahead, Emma. Tell him your idea. She took a deep breath. And then, she did.